Welcome back to Midnight and Murder, where stories of mystery and intrigue lull you gently into the arms of sleep. Tonight we have a jungle crime mystery edition. Let's go. 1. The vanishing over Virunga. The call came just before dawn. A small bush plane carrying 4 passengers had disappeared over the Virunga rainforest. No emergency beacon, no distress signal, only silence. Detective Selena Mora, calm under pressure and seasoned in jungle operations, was dispatched alongside a mixed team of rangers and medics. Their journey began from a ranger outpost, with canoes cutting through mist-laced rivers flanked by tangled vines and overhanging canopies. The air was thick with moisture and mystery. Monkeys howled from somewhere deep in the foliage, and a brilliant bird darted above like sparks of color in the endless green. Selena kept her eyes on the trees. She knew how quickly the jungle could swallow evidence and people. Midway through the second day, they found the first sign, a length of shredded fuselage caught in the crook of a kapok tree. Just below it, a makeshift marker had been pressed into the mud, 3 sticks arranged in a triangle. Not a distress symbol, but something deliberate. Nearby, carved into a tree trunk, was a spiral. The grooves were fresh. Someone had passed this way, and recently. Selena ordered the team to slow down, moving carefully through dense undergrowth. The spiral reappeared every half-mile, etched into trees or drawn in ash on rocks. Whoever left them had a steady hand and no panic. That told Selena at least one survivor was alive, and thinking clearly. By the 4th day, they reached a waterfall where a lantern hung from a vine, gently swaying despite the still air. It was an old jungle trick: catch a breeze or an echo where no wind should be. Beneath it, half buried in moss, was a journal wrapped in canvas. Inside, a few pages had been scrawled with notes. 3 survived the crash, 1 injured, food is low, heading to river curve. Watch the light. Selena's pulse quickened, not with fear, but focus. She showed the note to Ranger Cola, the local expert. He pointed to a loop in the river just 3 kilometers ahead. Old missionary grounds are there, been abandoned for decades. The team moved as dusk fell, torches glowing amber in the twilight. Animal cries surrounded them, shrill nightbirds, croaking frogs, and the low purr of something feline. They reached the clearing just before night overtook them. What they found was not a campsite, but a ring of stones and charred wood, and at its center, a piece of aircraft aluminum shaped into a crude reflector. Nearby, a boot print in fresh mud. Suddenly, Selena heard a voice, not quite a whisper, not quite a word. Here. She turned slowly. A figure stepped out from behind a broken statue, arms raised, dirt smudged, sunburned but alive. It was the pilot. The others, he said, were deeper in the jungle, sheltered beneath a stone overhang after one fell and broke her leg. They'd taken turns leaving signs and scouting, waiting for rescue. Guided by the pilot and the spirals, Selena and her team reached the site at dawn. The 3 survivors were weak but responsive. As medics tended to them, Selena sat on a mossy stone, looking at the spirals carved into the rock wall. Symbols of patience, of presence. The jungle had held them quietly, not out of malice but indifference. Only by listening, truly listening, had she found their echo. Later, as the group paddled back down river, Selena thought about how the jungle never shouted. It hummed, whispered, and murmured in ways most never noticed. It wasn't just a rescue mission. It was a lesson in reading silence. When a small bush plane crashes in the Virunga rainforest, a rescue team is sent to recover the passengers. Detective Selena Mora, an expert in survival and calm under pressure, leads the mission. But the only clue they find is a trail of carvings and trees and a glowing lantern swinging from a vine. 2. The temple beneath Tikal. In a jungle town near ancient Mayan ruins, strange symbols begin appearing on homes, bridges, and pathways overnight. Archaeologist turned detective Raul Espina notices they're not graffiti, but glyphs, deliberate, symmetrical, and consistent with sacred writings. The villagers whisper of La Voz de los Antiguos, the voice of the ancients. Raul consults dusty field notes and temple records, finding references to a lost sect of Mayan scribes who went underground after the Spanish conquest. Legends say their descendants still exist, passing down their knowledge in secret. The symbols lead Raoul down mist-soaked jungle paths to a forgotten well obscured by moss and vines. A pattern etched in stone around the well matches one depicted in a temple frieze, an invitation, not a warning. With care, he follows the trail through collapsed arches and root-strangled corridors. Below ground, Raoul uncovers a cavernous room filled with bioluminescent moss. In its center stands a stone dais inscribed with stories of balance, memory, and silence. He's not alone. Silent figures wearing embroidered robes emerge from behind shadowed pillars. They speak not with words, but with light projected through quartz lenses, glyphs illuminated like stars. The society had watched the world above grow louder, but they preserved the old ways. Knowledge passed through silence, not noise. Raoul is not detained nor threatened. He is guided through quiet chambers that house thousands of untouched scrolls and etched tablets. He's offered a choice: report what he's found, or become part of the lineage of watchers. He returns to the village days later, his story changed. He tells reporters only that the symbols were part of a forgotten tradition, a prank by local students. The officials are satisfied, but each month Raoul disappears for 3 days, heading into the jungle. He says little, but his notebook grows thicker, filled with sketches of glyphs and moonlit diagrams. In his silence, he's found a new kind of voice. The temple beneath Tikal remains unseen, but its influence quietly echoes through the trees, shaping futures written in stone and shadow. In a jungle town near ancient Mayan ruins, strange symbols begin appearing on buildings overnight. Archaeologist turned detective Raoul Espina follows the pattern through mist-laden jungle paths, discovering a long-lost temple hidden underground in a quiet society that guards its secrets in silence. 3. Whispering ferns. Deep in the cloud forests of Ecuador, guides speak of a green wind that causes explorers to vanish. When an ecotourist named Robin Hart goes missing, Detective Amaratello is called in. She's known for her calm demeanor and her respect for indigenous knowledge. Accompanied by local guide Tomas and armed with only a leather-bound journal left in the guest lodge, she steps into the mist-drenched wilderness. The journal had belonged to Robin and was filled with sketches of unusual ferns and half-translated folklore. One entry read, "Today I heard the wind sing, not whistle, not rustle, but sing. Tomas says it's La Voz Verde. He won't say more. I will follow it tomorrow." As Amara and Thomas follow Robin's path, they find moss-covered stones arranged in spirals and fern leaves folded in unnatural patterns. Tomas begins telling her stories passed down from his grandmother. Tales of the Yachak Nyambi, a secret trail known only to the wind callers, spirits that guard the boundaries of memory and silence. They camp beneath a twisted ceiba tree, and Amara hears it too, the wind, high above, murmuring in fragmented melodies. Tomas doesn't speak, only listens. The next morning, they find Robin's scarf caught on a branch, next to a single line etched into stone. The ferns remember. They descend deeper, past waterfalls and soft green walls of mist. At the base of a ravine, they find a clearing where wind patterns form perfect circles in the moss. In the center lies Robin, asleep but unharmed. She wakes slowly, dazed, whispering about hearing names carried on the wind. Later, as they guide her out of the forest, Amara reflects on what they experienced. It wasn't magic, not quite, but it was a mystery sung through leaves and held in silence. Robin continues her studies, this time with permission from the forest guardians, and Amara leaves with a page from the journal, folded carefully. If you listen long enough, the wind becomes a voice. The mystery of the green wind is never fully explained, but no one in the village questions it again. Deep in the cloud forests of Ecuador, guides speak of a green wind that causes explorers to vanish. When an eco-tourist goes missing, Detective Amaratello uses a blend of intuition, folklore, and old journals to find the truth buried beneath moss, fog, and fear. 4. The Jaguar's Mark. In a riverside village surrounded by thick jungle, golden artifacts begin disappearing from a museum's private collection. Claw-shaped symbols are left behind, carefully etched into wood, stone, even glass. Calm investigator Elias Cruz is called in from the nearby city of Tres Palmas. Known for his quiet persistence and deep knowledge of cultural artifacts, Elias soon finds himself drawn not just into a case, but into the layers of the village's past. The museum, a converted colonial estate, had long held relics believed to be blessed by the guardian jaguar, a spirit figure from the local folklore. According to ancient myth, the jaguar walked not just in dreams but in shadow, protecting sacred treasures from those who sought to misuse them. The museum's curator, Senora Belda, showed Elias the display cases, intact but mysteriously emptied overnight. Each stolen item had once belonged to the temple elders: a sun disk, a jaguar tooth pendant, and a chalice etched with rainforest scenes. And in each case, the thief left behind claw markings and a sliver of obsidian. Needing local insight, Elias sought out Diego Ibanez, an elderly shaman who lived alone upriver. Diego, known for his silent walks and deep eyes, initially refused to speak. But after Elias showed him a piece of the obsidian, the old man nodded and invited him into a smoke-filled hut where herbs hung from the ceiling and masks watched from the walls. Diego shared a tale of the Watcher below, the jaguar spirit tasked with guarding hidden truths. When those truths were threatened, it was said the Watcher would return through a chosen vessel. The marks, Diego whispered, are not just warnings, they are memory. They are return. Guided by Diego's lore and clues left behind, patterns in ash, disturbed moss, in the shape of claw markings, Elias followed the river into the deeper jungle. One night, while camping beneath towering cibus, he awoke to rhythmic growls echoing beyond the firelight. The next morning, he found a single golden pendant left beside his campfire, and another obsidian shard. It wasn't a threat, it was an offering. He returned to the village with a quiet theory: the artifacts weren't stolen, they were reclaimed. Diego confirmed this with a slow nod. Those items were never meant for glass cases. They are sacred. They remember where they belong. In a final act of reconciliation, Elias proposed a new wing at the museum, one designed in collaboration with Diego and other elders. The artifacts were returned, not to cases, but to sacred altars within the building, open to ritual and story. Visitors would not view them. They would learn from them. The theft stopped. The claw marks ceased. And on quiet nights, under a full moon, some say you can still hear the low rumble of the Watcher below, purring in peace. In a riverside village surrounded by thick jungle, golden artifacts begin disappearing from a museum's private collection. Claw-shaped symbols are left behind. Calm investigator Elias Cruz teams up with a reluctant shaman to track both the thief and the myth of the guardian jaguar. 5. Fire on the river. The floating village of Caravello stretched across a slow bend in the Amazon, its houses built on rafts tethered by rope and willpower. Each home bobbed with the rhythm of the current, lanterns swaying gently from poles carved with animal motifs. Caravello was known for its orchids, bright, exotic, fragrant, and its people who whispered more than they shouted. One night, flames shimmered up the river, not in the sky, but on the water. A raft engulfed in fire drifted silently toward the village. On it lay bundles of scorched orchids, charred crates, and a journal sealed in wax. The villagers gathered on their porches in silence, watching until it nudged the dock. Lucia Marquez, a quiet detective stationed at a nearby environmental outpost, was summoned. She arrived by a canoe just before dawn. The fire had gone out, but its message remained. Someone was sending a warning. The villagers were cautious but helpful. They spoke of old smuggling routes, river spirits, and rival settlements upstream who once fought over floral rights. Tales that blurred fact and myth. The elders described an abandoned port known as Finca Verde, where trade had once flourished but was now reclaimed by vines and rumor. Lucia followed the river by paddle and instinct. The air thickened with humidity and old secrets. She passed forgotten docks, sunken canoes, and floating blooms drifting like memories. At twilight, she arrived at Finca Verde, now silent save for cicadas and the crackle of old fire. There she found an altar built from crates and planks, stacked in a circle, each with a wilted orchid inside. In the center, a torch burned low, guarded by a jaguar carved into stone. Lucia opened the wax-sealed journal. Inside were pages of botanical research mixed with coded letters, drawings of trade symbols, and one phrase repeated, "What we take must be honored." From behind a curtain of vines, a figure stepped forward, elderly, barefoot, with hands stained by soil and ink. He introduced himself as Elias, once the head botanist of Caravello. He had vanished years ago after a dispute with the village over sacred lands. Elias confessed to burning the raft. Not to harm, he said, but to remind them. We gave too much. The orchids were never ours to sell. Lucia listened, neither judging nor interrupting. She proposed a solution. The floating village would form a new council, half elders, half youth, and restore rituals once used to thank the forest. Elias agreed, offering his journal to help rebuild what had been forgotten. When Lucia returned, the villagers greeted her with silence, then slow nods. Lanterns were lit not to mourn, but to remember. From that night on, no more orchids left Caravello without a blessing. And sometimes upriver, a single torch could be seen flickering, a reminder carved in flame. A floating village on the Amazon wakes one night to see flames drifting upriver. When a raft carrying rare orchids is found smoldering at the docks, a quiet detective named Lucia Marquez follows the trail upstream, into black waters, torch-lit ruins, and ancient trade secrets. 6. The drums beyond the canopy. Every night in Tambuco, a remote rainforest settlement, the villagers hear the drums. Slow, steady, always distant. The sound comes from beyond the canopy, past the map trails, past the known rivers, past memory. When a child named Naya vanishes after chasing a glowing butterfly near the edge of the village, her mother seeks out the only man who's ever returned from beyond the drums, Mateo Silva. Once a legendary tracker, now quietly retired, Mateo lives alone on the edge of the village with his machete, his hammock, and the ghost of his wife. He agrees to search for Nia without fanfare. At dawn, he enters the jungle, following her small footprints through ferns and moss, until the path disappears. Then come the drums, closer now, almost rhythmic enough to breathe with. Mateo doesn't flinch. He follows the sound. On the third day, he discovers a stone circle, ancient and half-buried. Around it lie faded cloth dolls, small offerings of fruit, and cracked clay masks. In the center stands a figure cloaked in vines. It speaks only one word: return. Mateo bows. He knows this isn't a threat. It's a memory, a test. Inside a hollowed tree nearby, he finds Nia asleep, unharmed, whispering about music in her dreams. He carries her home in silence. The drums stop for the first time in 30 years, and every evening after, Mateo leaves a candle by his hammock for those still listening beyond the trees. 7. The Obsidian Lens. Dr. Isabel Aranda, a physicist studying natural light refraction in jungle ecosystems, vanishes during a solo field expedition in the Sierra Madre. Her final message to her sister Camila is brief: I found something. It sees without eyes. Camilla, a quiet cryptographer who specializes in linguistic patterns, travels to the camp. There she finds her sister's equipment abandoned, save for a broken camera, an obsidian shard, in Isabel's field notebook. Inside are sketches of crystalline angles and diagrams of spirals embedded in stone. Locals speak of a place called El Espejo, the mirror, an obsidian-lined cave that reflects light from no known source. Camilla follows the notes into the forest, decoding the angles and charting the shadows. She finds the cave entrance, hidden behind a cascade of vines. Inside, light refracts strangely. Walls shimmer with movement that doesn't match her own. At the heart of the cave is a spiral of obsidian shards surrounding a flat stone. When Camilla kneels on it, the cave shows her not images, but impressions, memories. Isabel's final moments: wonder, fear, surrender. Camilla leaves the cave quietly. She never speaks of what she saw, but she sets up a research grant in Isabel's name, and every year she returns with a single shard to place on the spiral. The lens was never broken. It simply showed what others could not yet see. 8. The Flight of the Macaw. At dawn, a ranger named Nilo Reyes finds a brilliant macaw tapping at the station window. Tied to its leg is a slip of parchment with a name: Hector Vela, a lost explorer presumed dead. Nilo, known for his quiet manner and patience, follows the macaw into the jungle. Each evening it returns to guide him further. Nilo discovers not just Hector's old trails, but clues left in vines tied like knots and carvings on trees resembling ancient music notation. Deep within the jungle, Nilo stumbles upon a stone amphitheater overtaken by roots. In the center is a rusted recorder and a journal, Hector's. The final entry reads, "Nature speaks in song. I only listened," she answered. Moments later, the macaw lands beside the recorder and sings. Echoes fill the amphitheater, not just bird calls, but a harmonic resonance from the trees themselves. Nilo stays until dusk, recording the sound. He never finds Hector's body, only his notes in an untouched hammock high in the canopy. Nilo returns, submitting a report labeled only "missing but heard." Each season, more macaws arrive, and the forest hums a little louder. 9. The Firelight Pact. In a secluded jungle lodge once used by explorers, 5 guests sit around a campfire. They share a pact to reveal their deepest secret by firelight. The next morning they are gone. Only the fire pit remains, and a carved spiral in the ash. Weeks later, one of the guests is found wandering in a daze, unable to speak. Forensic psychologist Dr. Karina Velez is flown in to investigate. She interviews staff, studies journals, and examines the lodge's archive, piecing together the timeline. The survivor, a biologist named Marek, begins to draw, first symbols, then faces, then fire. He finally draws a 6th figure, someone not on the guest list. Dr. Velez explores the area around the lodge and discovers an overgrown path leading to a vine-covered shrine. Inside are artifacts marked with the same spiral symbol. Marek begins to hum a song the lodge staff haven't heard before. A local elder explains the story of the listener, a spirit who appears when secrets are spoken without fear. If one guest refused to reveal theirs, the pact would be broken, and the forest would keep them all. Karina proposes a ceremonial resolution. Marek returns to the shrine, places his journal in the fire pit, and whispers a name. The next morning, 4 journals are found beside the lodge door. The forest, it seems, had let go. 10. Ashes in the canopy. After a violent storm, ash markings appear high in the trees above the Congo outpost of Mbeki Station. Strange, symmetrical, and burnt into the bark. Botanist Jaime Ekon is sent to investigate. He's a quiet skeptic, more at home with soil samples than symbols. The markings form patterns, runes some say. A local priest named Father Musa joins Jaime, offering a theological lens to the mystery. Together they trek into the interior, following the ash. They discover birds that sing only in dawnlight, insects that gather in perfect circles, and a cave where fire once danced on the walls. Inside is a mural showing people walking into flame, then returning changed. Father Musa finds a relic in the ashes, an old crucifix wrapped in dried leaves. Jamie finds a seed pod untouched by the fire. Both take their discoveries back to the station. That night, it rains ash again. Jamie plants the seed pod in a jar. Within a week, a tree sprouts, one species unknown to science. Its leaves shimmer like embers in the dark. Neither man claims to understand what happened, but the tree grows, and the canopy glows a little more with every passing night. 11. The Lantern Path. It began with a flutter of feathers and the soft tap of beak against glass. Nilo Reyes, seated at his ranger station desk, looked up to find a new macaw perched at the window. This one was unlike the others, its plumage tinged with violet and emerald, a bioluminescent seed pod tied to its leg with twine woven from reeds. The bird stared until Nilo approached, untied the parcel, and read the tiny note embedded within. Follow the lights. Later that night, Nilo departed by canoe, paddling under a moon that glowed through the mist like a watchful eye. At the edge of the tributary, the first lantern shimmered into view. It hung from an ancient branch, its flame a cold green glow, bioluminescent moss pressed into a hollowed gourd. More followed, each swaying gently, guiding him deeper into the heart of the jungle. With each step ashore, the jungle seemed less wild and more intentional. Carvings from the amphitheater appeared etched on stones. Fractals mirrored the obsidian lens patterns. Trees bore claw marks identical to the jaguar's mark. And near a tree split by lightning, a spiral burned into bark glowed faintly. As dawn approached, Nilo found a clearing overgrown with vines, yet humming with energy. In the center stood a column of woven roots, spiraling like DNA, holding an orb of glass within which pulsed a soft amber light. Embedded in the rootwork were symbols, unmistakable to anyone who had followed the mysteries. The fire spiral, the obsidian shard, the fern's sigil. But he was not alone. Out of the trees stepped Camilla, Jaime, and Karina. Each had followed their own signs, their own dreams. Each had received a token from the jungle. Each had been summoned. They stood together in silence, watching the orb. It pulsed once, twice, then glowed steadily. "It's a convergence," Camilla whispered. "The jungle is aligning the paths. It wants us to understand." The jungle was no longer hiding secrets. It was gathering its witnesses. After another macaw delivers a glowing seed pod to Nilo Reyes, he follows the bird to a path illuminated by ancient lanterns, relit with bioluminescent moss. The trail reveals a convergence point where all previous mysteries intersect, markings from the obsidian lens, carvings like those at the amphitheater, and fire pit spirals. Something in the jungle has begun pulling the stories together. 12. The Forgotten Bell. The sound rang out at exactly 5:02 a.m., a single toll from the old mission tower long believed abandoned. Villagers stopped their morning routines, coffee left to steam in chipped mugs, eyes drawn toward the vine-covered silhouette against the hazy sky. No one had touched the bell in decades. The mechanism had rusted solid. No rope, no clapper, just silence. Until now. Camilla, already in the village studying glyphs from the obsidian lens, took immediate interest. She called Karina Velez, who was passing through after consulting on the shrine masks. Together they made their way to the mission tower, machetes clearing the path through dense vines. The air inside was damp, rich with moss and mold, as sunlight lanced through broken beams like celestial fingers. On the second floor, among the crumbling floorboards and shattered lantern glass, the bell stood still. But etched into its base, clean and glinting beneath the grime, were obsidian glyphs, not old ones, recent, cut with intention, a spiral, a wave, a jaguar's eye. Camilla traced them gently. "They're a call," she whispered, "a summoning symbol, not to people but to watchers." Behind the bell they discovered a loose brick. Inside the cavity was a leather scroll sealed with wax and marked by the same spiral. They opened it, a diagram, 5 circles arranged in a star. At the center, the glyph for balance. Below it, a line written in archaic dialect. "Return what was taken, or silence will turn to flame." As they left the tower, they noted something new. Children assembling small rock spirals in the dirt outside, mimicking what they'd seen. No one taught them. They simply knew. The bell tolled again the next morning. Same time. The jungle, it seemed, had reactivated an alarm. One that no longer waited for human hands to ring it. 13 roots. That whisper. It began subtly, spores drifting from Jamie Ekin's ember-leafed tree like fireflies, swirling in slow patterns that clung to the walls of the research station. Jamie at first believed it a side effect of the soil's chemistry, or perhaps a fungal adaptation. But then the spores formed shapes, distinct spirals, lines, and branching sigils matching glyphs seen at the amphitheater in Mirror Cave. Compelled by curiosity, Jaime returned to the tree, bringing a sound recorder and heat sensors. Beneath its thick roots, the ground pulsed faintly. When he placed a microphone near the trunk, he heard something unexpected. Not wind, not rustling, but layers of whispers, faint, overlapping voices. He boosted the volume, filtered the static. They were conversations, many voices, speaking from different decades. Some were recognizably old languages. Others were personal, lullabies, promises, even confessions. Jamie's voice, from his first expedition, even surfaced for a moment. He had never recorded it. Following the direction of the strongest signals, he traced the mycorrhizal network, a fungal web connecting trees deeper into the jungle. What emerged was a hollow basin beneath a massive fig tree. The roots there seemed to vibrate in rhythm, like harp strings plucked by unseen fingers. Inside this natural chamber, the air buzzed with warmth. Jaime placed his hand on a root and instantly felt memory. Not in words, but impressions. Rain, fire, footsteps, a kiss, a warning. The jungle wasn't just alive, it remembered. And now it was speaking through the oldest medium of all, its roots. When Jaime returned to camp, his recorder had stopped working. But the spores had now written a new glyph across the wall, a spiral made of leaf shadows. It was growing. 14, the sixth mask. It was the night of the Harvest Moon Festival, a celebration meant to honor the old spirits of the jungle and thank the land for its quiet protection. Masks lined the central altar, each a colorful tribute carved by villagers and children alike. Jaguars, serpents, owls, even wind spirits. But one mask stood apart. It was darker than the others, carved from old stone, not wood. Smooth and expressionless, yet haunting. No one could say who had made it. When asked, every artist denied responsibility. It hadn't been there that morning. Mark, still recovering from his encounter at the Firelight Shrine, was among the crowd. When he saw the mask, his hand moved of its own accord, sketching the sixth figure he'd drawn so many times. A form draped in shadow, surrounded by spirals, with eyes like obsidian stars. Mateo Silva stepped forward from the gathering. "I've seen this before," he said softly. "Long ago, at the edge of the world, in stones so old the roots grew around it. They left the village by lantern light, guided by intuition and memory. Mateo led Marek through a forest pass few traveled, until they reached a rise above a forgotten glade. There stood an unmarked shrine choked in vines and moss. 6 figures were carved into its face, arranged like constellations. 5 were worn by time. The 6th was a smear, until now. As moonlight hit the stone, lines began to reform. Shoulders, a hood, a downward gaze. The face of the mask on the altar. Marek stepped closer. The air grew colder. A faint whisper rode the wind. The witness returns. The 6th mask wasn't meant to be worn. It was meant to be remembered. And its time had come again. 15. The Jade Signal. It started as a blurred green glow in a satellite image, an anomaly beneath the dense canopy, deep in the uncharted eastern quadrant. Camilla spotted it while scanning old geological maps for glyph patterns. The image showed a massive jade formation, perfectly round, with heat signatures pulsing from its center. She sent the data to Karina, who confirmed the heat readings were active, fluctuating in a timed rhythm. That same night, all 4 of them, Camilla, Karina, Nilo, and Jaime, had the same dream. A spiral reshaping itself into a beacon, rising from the ground like a lighthouse. Camilla returned to the mirror cave where the spiral carvings had changed. The original concentric form had twisted into an upward spire, resembling the jade beacon. When she placed her hand on the wall, a pulse radiated outward, vibrating the stone and sending echoes down hidden corridors. They met at the site 2 days later. The jungle had grown denser than before, as if trying to guard something. Birds avoided the canopy. Even insects moved in silence. Jamie's equipment picked up electromagnetic pulses synchronized with the signal's rhythm. They found it at twilight, a jade dome partially swallowed by roots. Carvings lined its surface, identical to those from the lens, the shrine, the amphitheater. The spiral was not a symbol. It was a call. The formation's center held a chamber, and within it, an orb of hardened sap encasing a single pulsing ember. "It's alive," Karina whispered. Not metaphorically, literally, a living message preserved for eons. As they stood in silence, the chamber walls began to glow. Stories danced across the surface, figures, masks, flames, roots, birds. The jungle had been telling a story all along, and now it wanted them to see it whole. 16. The Hollow Tree's Secret. It began as a rumor whispered by children about a singing tree in the Silent Zone, where even monkeys dared not tread. The stories reached Camilla through a local boy named Thiago, who carried an old cassette recorder. "I caught it," he said, "but the song's backward." Camilla and Jaime followed him into the forest, toward the lowlands where fog clung like cobwebs and even birds stayed silent. There, beneath the moss-draped canopy, stood the tree, tall, hollow, ringed by fungi glowing faintly green. Thiago pressed play. The sound was haunting, a melody buried in layers, almost human. Jaime reversed the playback on his laptop. The tune resolved into something older, a chant in ancient Mayan. Raul Espina, presumed lost years ago, appeared the next morning at their station. He was barefoot, thinner but calm. "It called me back," he said. "The tree, the song. It's not music, it's language." Raul had been living with the Silent Society, the temple dwellers who vanished decades ago. He explained that the tree marked the entrance to an acoustic archive, roots intertwined with old bones and sacred stones, capturing echoes of memory and belief. Camila placed a recorder at the base. It picked up overlapping voices, ceremonial greetings, names of explorers, warnings, lullabies. When Raul translated the chant, it became clear. We are not lost. We are listening. The tree didn't just echo, it remembered. And now, with Raul's return, it began humming again, louder, clearer, not in fear, but in welcome. Tertidides 17, Letters from the Flame. It was just past dawn when Nilo Reyes returned to the overgrown amphitheater, its stones slick with dew and wrapped in vines like sleeping serpents. He had come alone, drawn by an uneasy warmth in his chest, like a call unanswered. Something burned in the clearing, but not with flame. Not yet. In the center, nestled within the cracked dais, lay a circle of charred leaf scrolls. They were arranged with deliberate care, stacked and layered in a spiral moving inward. Nilo approached with reverence. The leaves, though scorched, shimmered with faint embers, pulsing in rhythm with the jungle's breath. As he unrolled the first scroll, the ash flaked, but the writing endured, etched by fire. It began with the present day, with names and places he recognized. Camila, Karina, the Jade Chamber. The next leaf described events from months ago, then years. Each scroll he opened took him further backward, through memories not his own. The scrolls described journeys into the jungle, first contacts with the Temple Society, secrets spoken under firelight, and warnings unheeded. The language changed, but the voice remained constant. It wasn't a single person. It was the jungle itself, chronicling the lives that had touched its heart. Then came the final leaf, older than the others, brittle and dark. It told of the first explorer to vanish in these woods. His name, Elias Valdero. The jungle had welcomed him, tested him, and watched him fall silent. But he left behind these scrolls as proof of one thing. The jungle remembered those who listened. And in return, it wrote them into its flame. 18, the floating bones. The river had dropped 3 meters in a week. Caravello's floating village tilted uneasily, its homes creaking as ropes tightened against the shifting waterline. One morning, children collecting fish traps returned wide-eyed. Something long submerged had surfaced just beyond the mangrove's edge. Lucia Marquez arrived that afternoon, summoned by elders who recognized the carvings on the revealed wreckage. It was a longboat, blackened with age and carved with spirals, fire sigils, and jaguar eyes. Its hull had been sealed with resin and obsidian, symbols used only in ceremonial burial rites. Inside the warped frame, Lucia discovered a small cabin, remarkably intact. The walls were lined with melted wax, soot-streaked charms, and folded cloths embroidered with the same fern patterns she'd seen in earlier investigations. At the center of the cabin sat a music box, hand-carved from sandalwood and wrapped in wax cord. She wound the key once. The melody that emerged was slow, minor-keyed, and hauntingly familiar. It was the same tune Nia whispered in her sleep after being found in the stone circle months earlier. As the final note played, the water outside rippled, though no wind stirred. Lucia examined the logbook sealed beneath the floorboards. The writing inside described a crew of 6 carrying sacred items through forbidden waters. Their mission, to return the stolen objects to the temple grove. They had vanished. The final entry read, "The river demands memory, not sacrifice. We carry the song home." Lucia closed the book, tucked the music box beneath her coat, and signaled to the village. This wreck wasn't just a relic. It was a message that had finally reached the shore. Chapter 19, The Sky Below. It happened in the middle of the night, a thunderous groan followed by a tremor that rippled through Mbeke Station. In the morning, the research team found a massive sinkhole just beyond the eastern ridge. But this was no ordinary collapse. The earth had opened into an inverted cave system, and from its walls dangled roots like chandeliers, twisted, blooming with bioluminescence. Camila and Jaime rappelled down, their headlamps catching glimmers of quartz and obsidian veins. The walls reflected light strangely, not just bouncing it, but warping it, casting ghost-like shadows of the canopy above, as though the jungle itself had been turned upside down. At the bottom, they found shallow pools that rippled with faint warmth. In one, a stone disk sat half submerged, etched with symbols they'd encountered at the Jade Dome, the amphitheater, and the shrine. It bore a map, not of territory, but of resonance points, locations throughout the jungle where echoes converged. Camilla traced a path between them. It wasn't geographic, it was energetic. Each mystery site was part of a network. The spiral wasn't just a symbol, it was a signal traveling underground, amplified by roots, water, and stone. As Jaime tested vibrations with a geophone, the stone disk began to hum. The cave shimmered with reflected canopy light, the trees above aligning with their inverted counterparts. "It's the sky below," Jaime whispered. "The jungle is mirroring itself." Camilla nodded. "And maybe remembering what it used to be, or what it wants to become." They climbed out with new urgency. The network wasn't random. It was alive, and it had just opened another door, 20. The pulse of the canopy, it began at dusk. From Mbeke to Caravello, from the amphitheater to the mirror cave, the spirals lit up. No longer faint glows, they pulsed. Every tree that had once borne symbols now shimmered with coordinated light. From above, satellite feeds showed a slow, undulating rhythm, pulsing across the forest in a perfect wave, as if the canopy itself had a heartbeat. Birds fell silent. Insects paused. Time seemed to draw in a long, steady breath. Camilla stood at the edge of the jade formation, eyes wide as the sap orb began to glow brighter. Nearby, Jaime was watching seismic monitors spike without tremor. Nilo, in the clearing where the lanterns had first led him, stood unmoving as each one reignited without touch. Karina read her notes by firelight, only to watch them gently lift into the air, as if weightless with revelation. Mateo returned to the stone circle where he had once found Nia and saw something he hadn't before, a seventh stone, hidden beneath roots, now glowing. He knelt, laid a palm upon it. They had all returned to the beginning. The jungle was no longer whispering, it was speaking, and not just to one or two of them, but to all of them. Each of the explorers, scholars, rangers, and witnesses began to hear a hum, not in their ears, but in their bones, a rhythm that matched the pulse in the ground. The jungle had become a living story, a single organism reaching out through light and memory. And then it stopped. All at once, the spirals dimmed, not extinguished, but resting. On each person's body, on palm, shoulder, or ankle, glowed a faint new mark, a spiral surrounded by 5 dots, a symbol of witness. The jungle had spoken. Now it waited for an answer. As your eyes grow heavier and your thoughts drift slowly into stillness, let the rhythms of the jungle carry you. The symbols, the songs, the silent watchers, they remain, pulsing quietly under canopy and stone. You are now a part of their story, and they will remember. Sleep well, dear listener. The mystery rests with you tonight.